When your wife says she's going to relax with her girlfriends, and you see her putting on that same red dress she wore when you first met 3 years ago, something's not right. My name was William, I was 31 years old, and I was a DJ in New York. My wife Julia worked as a cosmetologist in a trendy salon in Manhattan. We met at one of my parties at the Velvet Underground Club. She was dancing right in front of the DJ booth, and our eyes met exactly when I was launching the track that changed everything. After that night, she started coming to every one of my performances. I fell in love instantly. The first 2 years of marriage were perfect. Julia supported my career, I supported her business. We lived in a small but cozy apartment in Brooklyn. I earned well, stable middle class, enough for a comfortable life. But somewhere after the 3rd year, something changed. Julia started going to other clubs more often. "Will, I can't listen to the same music every night," she said, and it sounded logical. I understood myself that being married to a DJ meant hearing the same tracks over and over again. So I didn't object. I trusted her completely. But one evening when I was playing at a party at Studio 54 Revival, my old friend Marcus approached me during the break. His face was serious. "Will, we need to talk." "What happened?" I immediately felt that this was something important. "I saw Julia last Friday. At the Neon Pulse Club. She was kissing some guy. Tall, wearing glasses, looked like a scientist or something." The world around me became unreal. The music kept playing, people were dancing, but I felt like something tore inside me. "Are you sure?" "Absolutely." "Well, I'm sorry. I didn't know how to tell you this." What I saw next turned everything upside down. That same evening I returned home earlier than usual. Julia was sleeping, her phone was charging. I had never checked her messages, until that moment. My hands were shaking when I opened the messenger. And there I saw correspondence with a contact named Salon Supplier. Strange name for someone you're discussing 9 p.m. club meetings with. But that wasn't the worst part. The message history was deleted. I could only see the last 2 days of correspondence, although the contact had existed for months. Some messages looked edited, with gaps and dates. She was trying to cover her tracks. I thought it couldn't get any worse, but the next morning at breakfast I asked, "Jules, how was your evening with the girls?" "Great," she smiled so naturally as if nothing had happened. "We were at that new cocktail bar on 5th Avenue. A lot." Marcus saw her at Neon Pulse, a completely different part of the city. It was at this moment that I realized everything she said was a lie. I couldn't just confront her. I needed evidence, real, undeniable evidence. So I called Marcus again. "Listen, I need a favor. A big one. Anything, bro. Follow her. I need to know who he is, where they meet, how often. Everything." Marcus didn't ask unnecessary questions. For the next 2 weeks he was my eyes. He found out that the guy's name was Leon. He was a physicist at the Columbia University Research Center. They met 3 months ago at the Quantum Lounge Bar, an ironic name for a physicist. They met regularly, most often at Neon Pulse, sometimes at other clubs. Marcus even managed to record several videos on his phone, how they danced too close, how he hugged her waist, how they kissed near the bar counter. And that's only half the story. When I got all the evidence, I understood. I needed a plan. Not just a divorce. I needed justice. Revenge. I wanted her to feel the same thing I felt. I started acting carefully. First, I met with a lawyer, a professional in family matters. I showed him all the evidence that Marcus had collected. Videos, photos, everything. The lawyer was impressed. "You have a very strong position, Mr. William. With such evidence, we can ensure a fair distribution of property." Then I started preparing a financial base. I opened a separate account, transferred half of our joint savings there. This was my legal right, as the lawyer explained to me. Julia didn't notice anything. She was too busy with her salon affairs and evenings with Leon. She didn't even suspect that I already knew everything. The time came for the final act. I planned everything for that evening when I had a big performance at the prestigious Electric Dreams Club. Julia, of course, said she would go with her girlfriends to another place. I knew that in reality she would go to Neon Pulse with Leon. But then she did what I will never forget. Before leaving for her evening with girlfriends, she came up to me, kissed me on the cheek and said, "Well, I'm so proud of you. You're the best husband in the world." Those words burned like acid. I just nodded and smiled. That evening, after my performance, I didn't go home. Instead, I drove to Neon Pulse. Marcus was waiting for me at the entrance. We went in together. And there, on the dance floor, I saw them. Julia was dancing with Leon, his hands were on her hips, she was laughing. This was the moment when I realized there was no turning back. I didn't approach them. Didn't make a scene. Instead, I turned around and left. The next morning, when Julia woke up, I was already sitting at the kitchen table with divorce papers. "What is this?" she asked, confused from sleep. I gave her a chance and regretted it. "Sign it." I pushed the papers toward her. "I know everything. Leon from Neon Pulse. 3 months. Don't deny it." Her face turned white. "Will, I can explain." "There's nothing to explain. I have videos, photos, witnesses. My lawyer has already arranged everything. You'll get your half of the apartment in savings, but that's it. And this will happen quickly and quietly, or I'll make all the evidence public, and your reputation as a Manhattan cosmetologist will be over." The next 2 weeks were pure hell. Julia tried to justify herself, said it was a mistake, that she actually loved me, and Leon was just entertainment, a way to feel alive. I didn't believe a single word. The divorce process went quickly. The court satisfied my position. We divided everything equally. We sold the apartment, divided the money. She took half of my savings, but that was the price for freedom. And only at the end did I learn the truth. A month after the divorce, Marcus informed me of the latest news. Julia and Leon broke up. It turned out that Leon was married and was using Julia just for fun. When his wife found out about the affair, he immediately cut off all contact with Julia. She was left alone. Without a husband, without a lover, with a ruined reputation among mutual acquaintances who learned about the reason for our divorce. I felt empty. Not happy about the revenge, but not sad either. Just liberated. I realized that I no longer wanted to deal with women who lived the nightlife, who were constantly looking for something new in bars and clubs. I was tired of that environment. I started visiting the small morning brew coffee shop more often near my new apartment. And there I met Emma, a barista with warm brown eyes and a sincere smile. She knew nothing about nightclubs, wasn't interested in parties. She loved books, morning walks, and coffee with cinnamon. 6 months passed and I finally felt something inside me beginning to heal. I was still a DJ, still playing music, but now I was coming home to a person who valued me, not the lifestyle around me. Julia wrote to me several times trying to restore contact, but I blocked every message. That chapter of my story closed forever. I learned something important. Trust is the foundation of everything, and when it collapses you need to build again from scratch, but with different people in a different place with new rules. I no longer looked for anyone in nightclubs. My happiness now smelled like freshly brewed coffee and began with the morning sun, not neon lights. But let me tell you the full story from the beginning, because what happened between that first confrontation and the final resolution was far more complex than I initially revealed. The day I received those divorce papers back, signed by Julia with trembling hands, I thought it was over. But revenge, real revenge, was just beginning. You see, I had spent those 2 weeks before confronting her not just collecting evidence, I had been planning something much bigger. Marcus had become more than just a friend during this time. He had become my partner in what I can only describe as the most calculated takedown I'd ever orchestrated. We didn't just follow Julia and Leon. We documented everything. Every meeting, every lie she told me about where she was going, every time she claimed to be at a work event, when she was actually grinding against Leon on some dance floor. But here's what made it truly devastating. I had also been documenting my own life. Every night I came home to an empty apartment because she was out with friends. Every dinner I ate alone. Every anniversary she forgot or half-heartedly celebrated. I had been building a narrative, and it was about to become very public. The night before I served her the divorce papers, I had done something that would change everything. I had created a website. Nothing fancy, nothing illegal, just a simple blog where I told my story. I didn't use her real name, of course. I called her J and Leon L. But I included every detail, every date, every lie. I wrote it like a diary, entries dating back 6 months, chronicling my growing suspicions, my pain, my discovery. And then I did something brilliant. I posted it to every DJ forum, every music industry group I was part of. The story went viral in our community within hours. Other DJs started sharing their own stories of partners who couldn't handle the lifestyle, who sought excitement elsewhere. My story became a cautionary tale, a rallying cry. But I wasn't done. Julia's salon catered to a very specific clientele, wealthy Manhattan socialites, influencers, women who valued their reputation above all else. Through Marcus, I had discovered that 3 of her regular clients were wives of men I had played events for. Small world, right? I didn't contact them directly. That would have been too obvious. Instead, I simply mentioned to these men casually during events that I had recently discovered my wife's infidelity and was going through a divorce. I mentioned that my wife worked at a salon on Madison Avenue. I mentioned that I had learned fidelity and trust were becoming rare commodities in our city. Word spread. Within a week, Julia had lost 5 major clients. Her boss started asking questions. Her income took a significant hit. Meanwhile, I had also been strategic about our financial situation. That separate account I mentioned? I hadn't just transferred half our savings. I had been meticulous about documenting every penny I had earned during our marriage, every investment I had made before we got married, every gift from my parents. My lawyer helped me prove that a significant portion of what Julia considered our money was actually mine from before the marriage or earned entirely through my work. When we finally sat down with lawyers to divide assets, Julia's face fell as she realized she would be getting far less than she expected. The apartment in Brooklyn? I had purchased it 2 months before we got married with money from an inheritance from my grandmother. It was never community property. She got nothing from that. The savings account she thought we'd split 50-50? After my lawyer finished calculating, she was entitled to maybe 30%. The rest was either premarital assets or could be traced directly to my DJ income, which I had meticulously kept separate from her earnings. But the real kicker came during one of our mediation sessions. Julia's lawyer brought up the fact that she had contributed to my career, by attending my shows, by being supportive. My lawyer smiled and pulled out a folder. Inside were printouts of Julia's social media posts from the past year. In not one single post had she mentioned me, my career, or my music. Instead, there were dozens of photos of her at various clubs where I wasn't performing. There were selfies, group shots with friends I'd never met, check-ins at bars and lounges all over the city. And then my lawyer revealed the coup de grace. Several of these photos, when we examined them closely, showed Leon in the background. In one, taken 4 months ago, you could clearly see his hand on her shoulder. The metadata on the photos proved they were taken on nights when she had told me she was at work events or spa nights with the girls. Julia's lawyer had no response. Her claim that she had been a supportive wife crumbled. The mediation ended with her getting exactly what the law entitled her to and not a penny more. But I still wasn't satisfied. See, I had learned something about Leon during Marcus's investigation. He wasn't just any physicist. He was actually up for a significant promotion at Columbia, a tenure-track position that would set him up for life. And Columbia, like most universities, had strict policies about workplace conduct and personal behavior that could reflect poorly on the institution. I didn't report him directly. That would have been too obvious. Instead, I made sure that my viral blog post, the one that had spread through the DJ community, somehow found its way to a Columbia message board. I made sure it included details about a physicist from Columbia, who had engaged in an affair with a married woman he met at a bar. The post didn't name Leon specifically, but it included enough details: the Quantum Lounge bar, the timeline, the clubs where they met, that people who knew him could connect the dots. And in the small world of academic physics in New York, dots got connected quickly. Leon didn't lose his job, but he did lose that promotion. And when his wife found out, not from me but from a concerned colleague who had seen the posts, she didn't just leave him. She took their kids and moved back to Boston, and she made sure everyone in their social circle knew exactly why. Leon tried to turn to Julia for comfort. After all, they'd been having this passionate affair, right? They had something special, right? Wrong. Marcus reported back to me that when Leon showed up at Julia's apartment, she'd moved into a smaller place in Queens after our divorce. She wouldn't even let him in. She screamed at him through the door that he had ruined her life, that she had lost everything because of him, and that she never wanted to see him again. The truth was, Julia hadn't loved Leon. She'd loved the excitement, the danger, the thrill of doing something forbidden. Once that thrill came with real consequences, once it cost her marriage, her home, her income, and her reputation, Leon became just a reminder of everything she'd lost. I learned all this through Marcus, who had stayed friendly with some of Julia's former co-workers. They told him Julia had become a shadow of herself. She'd gained weight, stopped taking care of her appearance the way she used to, and had become bitter and angry. She tried to date a few times, but word of the affair had spread enough that most men in our social circle knew to stay away. Meanwhile, my life had taken a completely different turn. About 3 months after the divorce was finalized, I had wandered into morning brew after a particularly long night of work. I was exhausted, emotionally drained, and honestly just wanted a quiet place to sit and think. That's when I met Emma. She was working the morning shift, and when I walked in looking like death warmed over, she didn't hit me with the fake cheerful barista voice. Instead, she looked at me and said, "Rough night? You look like you need something strong." I laughed for the first time in weeks. "Is it that obvious? Honey, you look like you've been through a war." Sit down. I'll make you something that'll help. She brought me a coffee that was perfect, strong enough to wake me up, but with just enough sweetness to remind me that life could still taste good. We started talking. I didn't tell her about Julia or the divorce at first. We just talked about music, about books she was reading, about life in New York. Emma was different from anyone I'd dated before. She was a morning person, loved hiking, and had never set foot in a nightclub. She thought my job was interesting, but didn't want to be part of that scene. She valued quiet evenings at home, cooking dinner together, watching movies. At first, I wasn't sure if this was what I wanted. Part of me missed the excitement, the energy of the club scene. But then I realized something. That excitement had cost me everything. It had cost me my marriage, my trust, my peace of mind. With Emma, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Safe. Secure. Like I could build something real that wouldn't crumble the moment I turned my back. We took things slow. Really slow. I was honest with her about what I'd been through, about the divorce, about my trust issues. She listened without judgment and told me we could move at whatever pace I needed. 6 months after we met, I introduced her to Marcus. He pulled me aside afterward and said, "Man, she's nothing like Julia. She's real. Don't screw this up." I didn't plan to. A year after my divorce, I ran into Julia at a grocery store in Brooklyn. I almost didn't recognize her at first. She looked diminished. Not just physically but in her whole demeanor. She was wearing sweatpants and a hoodie, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, no makeup. She saw me and froze. Then she saw Emma standing next to me and I watched something break in her eyes. "Will," she said quietly. "You look good." "Thanks," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "How are you?" Managing." She glanced at Emma, then back at me. "I tried to call you. A few times." "I know. I blocked your number." She nodded slowly. "I deserve that. I deserved all of it. I wanted you to know that I'm sorry. Really sorry. I was stupid and selfish and I threw away the best thing in my life." I looked at her, this woman I had once loved more than anything, who had betrayed me in the worst possible way. And I felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction at seeing her brought low, nothing. "I appreciate that," I said finally. "I hope you find what you're looking for." As Emma and I walked away, she squeezed my hand. "That was her?" "Yeah. You handled that with a lot of grace." I've had time to process. And honestly, seeing her like that didn't make me feel better. It just made me grateful for what I have now. Emma smiled and kissed my cheek. "What do we have now?" "Something real," I said. "Finally something real." The final piece of my revenge came not from anything I did, but from karma itself. About 18 months after our divorce, I heard through the grapevine that Julia had tried to get Leon back. She'd shown up at his new apartment, he'd moved after his own divorce, begging him to give their relationship a real chance now that they were both free. Leon had looked at her and said, according to the friend of a friend who somehow heard about it, "You were just a distraction. You're not the kind of woman a man builds a life with. You're the kind of woman who destroys lives." Julia had to face the ultimate truth. She had given up everything for a man who had never valued her at all. She'd thrown away a husband who had loved her, a stable life, a good reputation, all for someone who saw her as nothing more than a temporary thrill. Meanwhile, I proposed to Emma on a hiking trip upstate, far from any club or bar or anywhere that reminded me of my old life. She said yes, and we got married 6 months later in a small ceremony with close friends and family. Marcus was my best man. We honeymooned in Colorado, hiking through mountains and sleeping under stars. I still worked as a DJ, it was my passion and my career, but I became more selective about the venues I played. I focused on corporate events, private parties, weddings. I still did some club nights, but I made sure they were quality venues with good reputations. And every night, no matter how late I got home, Emma was there, sometimes asleep on the couch waiting for me, sometimes reading in bed. The nightlife world that had once been my everything became just my job. My real life was in the morning coffee with Emma, the weekend hikes, the quiet dinners where we talked about everything and nothing. 2 years after my divorce from Julia, Emma told me she was pregnant. We were having a daughter. As I held Emma, feeling our baby kick, I realized that Julia's betrayal, as painful as it had been, had actually been a gift. It had freed me from a relationship that was built on nothing solid, that would have eventually collapsed under its own weight. It had led me to someone who actually valued the same things I did, who wanted to build a real life instead of just chasing the next thrill. I never saw Julia again after that day in the grocery store. I heard she eventually moved out of New York, went back to wherever she'd grown up. Some people said she'd given up cosmetology entirely, that the scandal had followed her and made it impossible to rebuild her career in the beauty industry. I didn't take pleasure in that. I'd gotten my revenge, sure, but in the end, the best revenge wasn't her suffering. It was my happiness. It was the life I built with Emma, the family we were creating, the peace I'd found. As I write this, my daughter is 3 years old. She's named Grace because that's what I'd needed to find. Grace to forgive myself for missing the signs, grace to move forward, grace to trust again. Sometimes, late at night after a gig, I think about those days when I was married to Julia. I remember the good times, the early days when I thought we were building something real. And I'm grateful for those memories because they taught me what I didn't want, which made it easier to recognize what I did want when I found it. The DJ world still talks about my story sometimes. It's become one of those cautionary tales that gets passed around, usually when someone's complaining about their partner not understanding the lifestyle. Remember that guy William? They'll say. His wife couldn't handle it and cheated on him with some scientist. He divorced her and now he's married to a barista and they're happy as hell. And you know what? They're right. I'm happy as hell. Emma sometimes asks me if I ever regret how things went down, if I think I was too harsh in how I handled the divorce and the aftermath. I tell her the truth, I regret that it happened at all, but I don't regret how I handled it once it did. Julia made her choices and those choices had consequences. I just made sure those consequences were thorough. In the end, the story isn't really about revenge at all. It's about knowing your worth and refusing to accept less than you deserve. It's about recognizing when something is broken beyond repair and having the strength to walk away. It's about building something new and better from the ashes of what was destroyed. Julia wanted the excitement of nightclubs and the thrill of a forbidden affair. She got it and she paid the price. I wanted something real, something stable, something that would last. And with Emma I found it. That's the real ending to this story. Not Julia alone and regretful, not Leon losing his promotion, not even the viral blog post or the financial victory in divorce court. The real ending is me, Emma, and Grace sitting in our backyard in the suburbs. Yes, I moved to the suburbs and yes, I love it, grilling dinner on a Sunday afternoon while my daughter plays with bubbles and my wife reads a book in the sunshine. The real ending is peace. And that's the best revenge of all. But there's more to this story that I haven't told you yet. Something that happened during those 2 weeks when Marcus was following Julia, something that almost made me question everything I was doing. It was a Tuesday night about 10 days into the surveillance. I had just finished a set at a corporate event in Midtown, and I was exhausted. The music had been uninspired, the crowd disinterested, and I was questioning every choice I'd made in my career. I came home around midnight expecting Julia to be asleep as usual. Instead, she was waiting for me in the living room, sitting on our couch in the dark. When I turned on the light, I saw she'd been crying. "Will," she said, her voice breaking. "We need to talk." My heart stopped. Did she know? Had she figured out that Marcus was following her? Had Leon told her something? "What's wrong?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "I feel like we're drifting apart," she said, tears streaming down her face. "You're always working, I'm always working, and we barely see each other anymore. I miss you. I miss us." The irony was crushing. Here she was, the woman who was actively cheating on me, crying about how we were drifting apart. Part of me wanted to explode, to tell her I knew everything, to throw all of Marcus's evidence in her face right then and there. But I didn't. Instead, I sat down next to her and held her while she cried. And here's the twisted part. In that moment, I almost believed her. I almost thought maybe Marcus had been wrong, maybe it was all a misunderstanding, maybe my wife actually did love me and we were just going through a rough patch. "I love you," she whispered against my chest. "I don't want to lose you." "I love you too," I said, and at that moment I meant it. Despite everything I knew, despite all the evidence, there was still a part of me that loved the woman I had married, the woman I thought she was. We stayed up until 3 in the morning talking. She suggested we plan a vacation, just the two of us. Maybe Hawaii, maybe Europe. Somewhere we could reconnect and remember why we fell in love in the first place. She talked about starting a family, about how maybe it was time to think about kids, about building a real future together. I agreed to all of it, knowing it was all lies, knowing that while she was making these plans with me, she was still planning to see Leon the next weekend. The next morning, after she left for work, I called Marcus and told him what had happened. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Man, are you having second thoughts?" he asked carefully. "I don't know," I admitted. Part of me wants to believe her. Part of me thinks maybe if I just confronted her now, told her I know we could work through this. "Will," Marcus said firmly, "I'm going to send you the video from last night. Check your email." I opened my laptop with shaking hands. The video was from the previous evening, timestamped at 9:47 p.m. About 2 hours before, Julia had been sitting in our living room crying about us drifting apart. In the video, Julia was at Neon Pulse. She was wearing the black dress she told me she was wearing to a networking event for work. She was dancing with Leon, their bodies pressed together. And then, as I watched, he leaned in and whispered something in her ear. She threw her head back laughing, then grabbed his face and kissed him deeply, passionately, the way she used to kiss me. The video continued. They left the club together, Leon's arm around her waist. They got into a cab. Marcus had followed them to Leon's apartment in the Upper West Side. The video showed them entering the building at 10:23 p.m. Julia didn't leave until 11:41 p.m., giving her just enough time to get home, wash off her makeup, mess up her hair, and stage her emotional breakdown for my benefit. It was at this moment that I realized there was no turning back. The woman I had held last night, the woman who had cried in my arms and talked about our future, had been in another man's bed less than an hour earlier. The vacation she wanted to plan, the family she wanted to start, it was all manipulation, all part of whatever game she was playing. I called Marcus back. "Keep following her," I said, my voice cold. "I want to know everything. Every lie, every meeting, every single thing. And I want to make sure that when I'm done, she understands exactly what she's lost." That moment changed everything for me. Before, I had been hurt, angry, betrayed. But after seeing that video, after understanding the depth of her deception, something hardened inside me. This wasn't just about catching a cheating spouse anymore. This was about exposing someone who was manipulating me, lying to my face with tears in her eyes, planning a future with me while actively betraying me in the present. The revenge I had been planning suddenly felt inadequate. I needed something bigger, something that would show Julia, and everyone else, exactly what happens when you treat someone's love as a joke. Over the next 4 days, I became meticulous. I started keeping a journal, documenting every lie Julia told me. When she said she was at work late, I would check in with Marcus to confirm she was actually at a club with Leon. When she talked about wanting to spend more time together, I would note the timestamp and cross-reference it with evidence of her latest betrayal. I also started recording our conversations. Not legally for court use but for my own sanity. I needed to document the gaslighting, the manipulation, the way she could look me in the eye and lie without hesitation. Every "I love you" she said, every plan she made for our future, every tender moment we shared, I documented it all, knowing it was happening while she was actively maintaining a relationship with another man. The most painful recording was from 3 days before I confronted her. We were having dinner at home, a rare evening when we were both free. She reached across the table, took my hand and said, "Will, I know I haven't been the best wife lately. I've been so focused on work and my own stress. But I want you to know that you're everything to me. You're my partner, my best friend, my soulmate. I can't imagine my life without you." I had smiled and told her I felt the same way. And then 2 hours later, she had texted me saying she had to run back to the salon for an emergency client. Marcus confirmed she went straight to Neon Pulse, where Leon was waiting. This is why, when I finally served her those divorce papers, I felt no guilt. When I implemented every part of my revenge plan, I felt no remorse. Because I knew that every tear she had shed, every promise she had made, every moment of tenderness she had shown me had been a calculated lie designed to keep me in the dark while she pursued whatever excitement Leon provided. Some people might say I went too far with my revenge. They might say that ruining her reputation, taking most of the assets, exposing the affair in a way that cost her clients and cost Leon his promotion, that it was excessive, cruel even. But those people didn't see that video. They didn't hear her lie to their face with such ease and conviction. They didn't experience the particular torture of holding someone you love while knowing they'd been with someone else just an hour before. My revenge wasn't excessive. It was proportional. It was justice. And most importantly, it was complete. YouTube may no longer suggest my channel to you, so subscribe to it to receive new interesting stories. You will also help the channel grow and improve the quality of its content. The screen now displays a playlist with other interesting stories that you can listen to. You can also write in the comments what stories you would like to see on the channel.